بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. Assalamu alaikum, dear brothers and sisters. Once again, I would like to congratulate my dear brothers and sisters for the auspicious occasions that we have in month of Sha'ban. So the birth anniversary of Imam al-Husayn, Imam al-Sajjad, and al-Abbas ibn Ali, and the coming occasion, and especially the birth anniversary of Imam al-Ashr alayhi salam. So my talk, as is mentioned, is about Islamic spirituality. It's a topic that has been addressed by many scholars, different perspectives. So the viewpoint that I'm looking through it to address a subject, to study a subject, as I discussed it in the last session, is to understand Islamic spirituality through the examples provided by the role models that we believe in Shia school of thought, that they are appointed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Prophet peace be upon him, and our Imams. I mentioned in the last session the importance of understanding that spiritual perfection, since it's a matter of it's a matter of practice, not just theory. One cannot reach spiritual perfection by just reading a book, by taking a course on spirituality. Spirituality is something that needs to be practiced. And to be practiced, I mentioned that it is intertwined with role models, with learning from the people who are the prime example of Islamic spirituality. I mentioned that, I emphasized that, I insisted that one cannot understand Islamic spirituality isolated from the conduct and lifestyle of the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt. There are many cases in which people go astray in understanding Islamic spirituality because of the very fact of neglecting to understand Islamic teaching through the conduct and through the lifestyle and practices of our role models. So there are many movements that established so far since early Islam in the name of spirituality. And some of them ended up contrasting the main teachings of Islam. With this, I'm continuing my discussion by emphasizing also that Islamic spirituality, when we are talking about the spiritual perfection, is not just a matter of rituals, matter of religious practices, matter of performing certain actions. Islamic spirituality has different dimensions, different aspects, and the whole picture should be seen when we are talking on the topic. So Islamic spirituality can be defined in relationship between human and divine, can be defined when we are talking about the relationship between human and human, the social relationship, the kind of relationship that people they have with one another. And also the Islamic spirituality can be seen in the relation that human they have with the other creatures of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the relationship with nature, the relationship with animals. These are different aspects, different dimensions of spirituality that can be tackled when studying the subject. Tonight, I would like to focus to provide some examples of the point that I emphasize, that we have to understand Islamic spirituality through the lives of our role model, to highlight why it matters. I will provide some examples to see how certain teachings we can have a deeper understanding, a more comprehensive understanding of those spiritual teachings when we see it in action in the lives of our role models. Let's say, for example, someone who likes to be a football player. That's his goal. The goal of his life, wants to be a successful football player. Let's say that he is joining a football academy, a soccer academy. He studies there. So academically about different formations, for example, in when playing football, different playing a match, different positions, different ways of, for example, to in each position to play there, how to interact with the other players in the field. That's theory. Then one may have some certain practice matches in the academy as well with the other players, other students there. That's fine, that's good. One may even be praised, receive many compliments on their skills. However, how should one know if they already achieved the goal? If I'm looking just at a limited scale, I'm just looking at 20, 50, 100 other students that they are enrolled in the school, and I'm evaluating myself against them, maybe I feel that I'm already accomplished. But let's say if there are matches that I'm invited to play against some other football academies. Let's say I go to a kind of competition, soccer competition that is held in the city. I go even higher, I go to the province, the competitions in the matches that on the province level. Each level I go higher, I face players that are much more stronger than the ones I faced before. And it's only then that I realize, oh, still there is room to improve my skills. I was thinking that I'm the best when I was at my academy, but then when I play the match with the other students from the other academies, I realized that there are people who are better than me. As I'm going higher and higher, as the level goes higher, so let's say someone goes to the national level, someone goes to the international level, then because we face, and I face top players in the field on the international level, then I see, wow, I learned nothing. There is a huge gap in my skills and the skills that I see from top players in the world. The same example come here, for example, when we talk about certain Islamic teachings about spirituality. So when we are talking about the human-divine relationship, prayer is the prime example of a spiritual practice that defines the human-divine connection. We look at divine commands, we look at Quran, there are certain verses explicitly talks about the importance of prayer. Chapter Taha, for example, verse 14, إنني أنا الله لا إله إلا أنا فاعبدني وأقم الصلاة لذكري. I'm your, indeed, I'm your Lord. And there is no God beside me. Worship me and perform prayer to always remember me. Chapter Baqarah, verse 43. وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةَ وَارْكَعُوا مَعَ الرَّاكِعِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands, perform prayers, give zakat, give charity. We have, for example, in chapter Baqarah, verse 238, حافظوا على الصلوات والصلاة الوسطى وقوموا لله قانتين. Maintain prayer, observe prayers, especially the short prayers, and stand for the sake of Allah. Be steadfast. So we hear these divine commands. So I learn about prayer, I learn how to perform it, and then there are certain time slots I perform my prayer. However, I cannot understand what's the flaws of my prayers. I cannot understand the capacity, the spiritual capacity of prayers, the spiritual capacity that prayer can provide for me, unless I see the implications, the impacts of prayer in the lives of people who are who practice prayer, perform prayer in its full capacity, in its higher level, like the soccer player that I provide example. So someone who plays in very small area cannot see the shortcomings of his skills unless when he compares himself to someone who is on higher levels in that skill. So I cannot see, although that I see the teachings, Quran teaches us to perform prayers. Quran talks about the importance of prayers. However, as humans, we have to see it, we have to learn it from others who have the skill in a much better level than me. Then I see the shortcoming, I see the flaw. Then I try to fill the gap. For example, when it comes to paying attention to prayer, when it comes to looking at how unique is the status of prayers in Islamic spirituality. When we hear about Ali alayhi salam, a role model, and the kind of attention, the kind of importance that he is giving to prayer, it teaches us something that we cannot learn by ourselves. Let's say, for example, it is the Battle of Siffin. It is narrated that it was in the middle of the battle, and it was around the noon, around the time of the prayer. Ibn Abbas, he narrates, he says, reports that I saw Ali alayhi salam looking frequently at the sky, and he is in the middle of the battle, drawing a sword, fighting opponents. At the middle of battle, he's frequently looking at the sky. And then Ibn Abbas asked you, Amir al-Mu'minin, ما هذا الفعل? It's very dangerous. At the peak of the battle, you seems to be distracted by something. Ali alayhi salam says, أنظر إلى الزوال حتى نصلي. I'm looking, I'm watching the sky to see if it is time for the prayer. And Ibn Abbas, although he is a very devoted, although he's one of the most respected companions, but for him, it didn't make sense. It's a time of battle, it's a matter of life and death. And Imam is thinking about prayers. وهل هذا وقت الصلاة؟ إن عندنا لشغلا بالقتال عن الصلاة. Ibn Abbas says to Ali alayhi salam, I understand that this matter of prayer is important, but we are in the middle of a battle. And I think maybe it is justified to not think right now about prayers. And Imam alayhi salam responds, على ما نقاتلهم إنما نقاتلهم على الصلاة. For what we are fighting these people? What is the reason? We are fighting these people to ensure that we protect prayers, to ensure that we maintain this practice that is a symbol of the connection between human and divine. We fight them to make sure that this connection remains valid. So when I read this, when I see the importance that my role model gives to prayer, I get a better understanding of how important, how significant is this practice. When I hear, for example, from this narration from Jabir ibn Abdullah Ansari, he mentions from the Prophet, peace be upon him, that the Prophet لا يؤخر الصلاة للطعام ولا لغيره. Says that I never saw the Prophet to delay prayer, to, for example, eat first, eat the lunch, eat the dinner, or something else. So for the Prophet, peace be upon him, the priority was the prayer. Which is what we know in Islamic teaching, unless there is a justified excuse. Sometimes, for example, we are living in a secular community, not every time at the time of the prayer, we are able to perform our prayers. Maybe we are on our way back home, maybe we are somewhere that there is no proper place to perform prayer. Sometimes it's justified, but the point is that to have in mind, to believe and understand the priority of making this connection, to having priority of showing that we care for our Lord more than anything else. And the prayer is a symbol of that. It is also seen in the day of Ashura, in the practice of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. So it is said that it is Abu Thumamah, Amr ibn Abdullah al-Sa'idi, one of the companions of Husayn alayhi salam, when he saw that it's the time of the prayer, it was around noon, he addresses Imam Hussein alayhi salam, Ya Abu Abdullah, nafsi laka al-fida. إني أرى هؤلاء قد اقتربوا منك ولا والله لا تقتل حتى أقتل دونك إن شاء الله. And he says that, oh, Abu Abdullah, I see that these people, your enemy, getting closer and closer. And by Allah, I will not let them touch you as long as I'm alive. However, وأحب أن ألقي ربي وقد صليت هذه الصلاة التي دنا وقتها. But I would love to be killed after I perform this prayer that is already the time for it. Perform it first and then die protecting you. Imam alayhi salam addressed him, ذكرت الصلاة جعلك الله من المصلين الذاكرين. نعم هذا أول وقتها. Imam prays for him that may Allah record you among the true people who perform prayers and who are always remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and says, yes, this is the time for a prayer. And then Imam addresses his companions, say, Saluhum an yakuffu annu hatta nusalli. Tell them, I know it's the middle of the battle, but tell them that we want to perform our prayers first. And Imam Ali salam, he himself says the adhan, and when he sees that the opponent army, the army of Umar Assad, they don't care about prayer, he shouts, calling Umar ibn Sa'd, أنسيت شرايع الإسلام ألا تقف عن الحرب حتى نصلي وتصلون ونعود إلى الحرب. Did you forget the pillars of our faith? Although you are fighting me, although you are at war with me, but you call yourself a Muslim, and it's the time of the prayer. Stop the war so we can perform our prayer first. And the matter of performing prayer is so important for Imam to perform at the time that some of the companions, they lost their lives protecting the army of Imam al-Husayn when performing prayers. So it is said that Zuhayr ibn Qayn and Sa'id ibn Abdullah Hanafi and some others also mention one of the other companions, that he also, Amr ibn Gharadat al-Ansari, just 3 people and maybe others, they took the responsibility to protect the Imam and his companions and family when they are performing prayer. And it is Sa'id ibn Abdullah who was killed when he saw that Imam was actually saw an arrow aiming at Imam, and he took the arrow to protect the Imam. And he got so many injuries from different arrows, and he got killed on the spot. And also it's the same for the Amr ibn Qaradat al-Ansari. It was, but Zuhayr ibn Qayn survived the arrows and the attack. But just the point is that for Imam alayhi salam, it was so important to perform prayer on time, to show, to respect the symbol of the connection between human and divine, which is in Islamic spirituality is prayer, salat, that he stopped the war, performed the prayer, even if it cost some of his companions' lives, and his life was in danger, but it was that important for the Imam alayhi salam. When we see these examples, so it can tell us, it can give us a better sense of how crucial, how essential is the role of prayer as a spiritual practice in Islamic faith. How central is the role when we look at the way that our role models, they treated prayers. It is not something just by reciting a verse of Quran about that commanding us to perform prayer, we understand it. We only understand it when we look at these examples. When we talk about prayer, so unfortunately that's the case for me, for many others. We just perform 2 rak'ah of prayers, 4 rak'ah of prayers. Sometimes we are not even aware. Our heart is not even present. And we think that, okay, we performed our duty. But when, again, we compare the kind of attitude, the kind of attraction that we have to prayer, compare it to our role models, we see that something is going wrong here. When we talked about the passion of our role models for prayers, for example, it's the Prophet, peace be upon him, we heard it frequently about the Prophet asking Bilal, Arihna ya Bilal. So let us have some comfort by by performing our prayer, say azan. So for the Prophet, peace be upon him, the prayer is the time of comfort. The prayer is the shelter, the spiritual shelter for the Prophet of Islam. And it's the same kind of concept that you see in the hadith frequently mentioned from the Prophet, peace be upon him. الركعتان في جوف الليل أحب إلى الله من الدنيا وما فيها. 2 rak'ah prayers that I perform it in the middle of night. For me, I love it more than the whole world, material world, and what is within it. All the material properties, everything. 2 rak'ah prayer at the middle of night, I love it more than all of them. And you see Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam, when the night before the day of Ashura, when he sent his brother al-Fadl al-Abbas to ask for the night for the war to be postponed to the next day, so they can benefit from the night to make a spiritual connection for the spiritual purposes. Imam alayhi salam tells Abbas ibn Ali that ارجع إليهم فإن استطعت أن تؤخرهم إلى غدوة وتدفعهم عنا العشية. Just take some time from them. لعلنا نصلي لربنا الليلة وندعوه ونستغفره فهو يعلم أني كنت أحب الصلاة له وتلاوة كتابه وكثرة الدعاء والاستغفار. Just see if you can convince them to postpone the war to tomorrow, so we can have time to dedicate tonight to worshiping Allah and to perform prayer. And Allah knows how much I love prayers. So this is the love, the passion for this spiritual practice. Do we have the same passion, or do we see prayer as a kind of responsibility and burden that we have to do it just to make sure that we would not be punished in the hereafter for neglecting it? Do we feel the same spiritual connection to the prayers? I remember in my early youth, I remember sometimes I had this opportunity to attend the prayers, the Jama'ah prayer of late Ayatollah Bahjat. I do not forget. So those times that I got the opportunity, Allah gave me the blessing to attend those Jama'ah gathering, Jama'ah prayers. Although someone like me could not understand, could not have the spiritual experience of late Ayatollah Bahjat, but even just attending that prayer, even just seeing someone like him, that spiritual connection when he was performing his prayers and crying every word he was saying in his prayer, the whole mosque was somehow influenced and affected by his spirituality. So I was saying to myself, I remember saying that if this is the prayer, so what I'm performing, what is this then? There is a huge gap here. So again, when we look at role models beyond, it is only then that we can understand the shortcomings and flaws in our spirituality. So spirituality needs to be practiced while observing the role models who fulfilled spirituality in its full capacity in their lives. So we can compare, we can see what is the height of this practice, the spiritual practice that I can attain, and in what level I'm right now. So then it's only then that we we have the determination to work more, to be more careful when performing our prayers. Again, look at the examples of our spiritual role models when we are talking about the prayer as something about being present, being at the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when we do our prayers. It's not just some actions we do. The prayers means a specific connection, spiritual connection, that you stand before the Lord. At that moment, you are presenting yourself to your Lord. It's what Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says, that we have in Tahdhib al-Ahkam, إذا قمت في الصلاة فاعلم أنك بين يدي الله فإن كنت لا تراه فاعلم أنه يراك فأقبل قبل صلاتك. When you do your prayers, be aware that you are standing before the creator of the whole world. You are standing before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if you can't understand that you are in his presence, at least be mindful that he looks at you, he watches over you. Even if you can't feel the presence, but you can understand that he watches over you. So make sure that you are performing your prayer while your heart is completely, totally present. Aisha narrates that she talks about the Prophet, peace be upon him, says that كان رسول الله يحدثنا ونحدثه فإذا حضرت الصلاة فكأنه لم يعرفنا ولم نعرف. The Prophet, peace be upon him, was talking to us. We were talking to him. But when the time of the prayer was coming, it was like that he didn't know us anymore, and we didn't know him. He was so occupied with the prayer that he was not paying attention to anything else. It is also what Imam Sajjad alayhi salam narrates about Imam al-Mushtaba alayhi salam. Imam Sajjad alayhi salam, we have hadith in Amali for Sheikh al-Saduq. Imam says, إن الحسن بن علي بن أبي طالب كان أعبد الناس في زمانه وأزهدهم وأفضلهم. Mentions that Imam al-Hasan was the best of his time when it comes to spirituality, when it comes to zuhd and not having attachment to material world. And then he mentions some of the characteristics of Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam, and among them he indicates وَكَانَ إِذَا قَامَ فِي صَلَاتِهِ تَرْتَئِدُ فَرَائِسُهُ بَيْنَ يَدَيْ رَبِّهِ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ. When he was standing before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for prayer, all his body was shaking. His body was shaken out of the understanding the magnificence, the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is Imam al-Hasan who understands what prayer means. It is Imam al-Husayn, we have in another hadith that he says that كان الحسين بن علي عليهم السلام إذا تولى تغير لونه وارتعدت مفاصله. When Hussein was taking ablution, making wudu, the color of his face was changing, like, so you have in some narrations saying that turned yellow. So like someone who is afraid, someone who is expecting something that is too great, and his body was shaken. He was asked, فَقِيلَ لَهُ فِي ذَلِكَ, why you change this way when it's time of the prayer? Imam Ali said, حق لمن وقف بين يدي الله الملك الجبار أن يصفر لونه وترتعد مفاصله. Because I know that I'm going to stand before the Lord of the whole world. It is when we pay attention to how a spiritual practice that we have so many instructions, so many commands about it, like prayer in Islamic sources. It's only when we look at how it is manifested, exemplified in the lives of our role model that we can see the capacity of this spiritual practice and how much we are losing here. When I compare my prayer to Imam al-Husayn's prayer, when I compare my presence of heart, my presence of heart during the prayer, when I compare my understanding of what it means to stand before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during prayer, I see that there is a huge gap in terms of understanding, in terms of ma'rifah, insight, in terms of the spirituality. Let me give another example. I give prayer as an example of one of the dimensions of Islamic spirituality, which is the human divine connection. So prayer is a prime example of this aspect of Islamic spirituality. But let us talk about another aspect, which is related to Islamic spirituality when it comes to the relation between human and human, the social interaction. Islamic spirituality is not just a matter of, as I mentioned, it's not just a matter of human divine relationship. It's not just a matter of performing prayers and worships. That's why Islam banned monastic life. Because Islamic spirituality has to be translated also in a communal level, to be seen in the way that I'm interacting with other people, understanding that these people are Allah's creation. These people are Allah's most celebrated creation. And to serve them as serving the servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Again, when it comes to, for example, one of the practices about generosity, infaq, helping people, needy people, that's one of the practices that in Islamic spirituality is related to serving the community. There are divine commands. There are so many hadiths. When we look at Quran, for example, chapter Baqarah, verse 254, يا أيها الذين آمنوا أنفقوا مما رزقناكم من قبل أن يأتي يوم لا بيع ولا خلة ولا شفاعة والكافرون هم الظالمون. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands, O believers, give from the wealth, from the blessing that I granted you, that I'm the one who gave it to you. Give it to the others. Share it with the others before the day comes that you will not be anymore allowed to do so. You will not be anymore allowed to make any trade, to help someone to intercede for you. It is you today that you can change, that you can help yourself by giving a share of what I granted you to the others to save it for your hereafter. A similar concept we have it in chapter Al-Imran, verse 92, لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ. You will not reach the true meaning of goodness. You will not reach true meaning of spirituality, good deed, unless you give away some of what you love from your material gain. حتى تنفقوا مما تحبون. You share what you love for yourself, to share it with the others as well. وما تنفقوا من شيء فإن الله به عليم. And Allah knows how much you share with the others. So we have these divine commands, but to understand again the depth of the teaching, how it can be practiced, the extent to which one can be generous. Sometimes we do small donations, sometimes we give a small charity, and we think that we did such a big, for example, good action. Sometimes we help someone, we keep reminding him that I'm the one who helped you. Again, looking at, if you want to understand, for example, this practice, similar to the prayer, so this practice of infaq, of helping the others, if you want to see how much we progress so far in accomplishing the goal, in using the full capacity of this spiritual teaching, because again, although it's just giving money to someone, but it has a spiritual impact on someone. The concept of zuhd, the concept of getting detached from the material world, not to be attached to it, not to sacrifice one's spiritual perfection for the sake of the material gain. So the zuhd, one of the ways that helps us to come to that level, comes to that spiritual condition, is by practicing infaq. When you look at the examples of our role models, like so for example, you see that verse of Quran, chapter Isra, verse 29, ولا تجعل يدك مغلولة إلى عنقك ولا تبسطها كل البسط فتقعد ملوما محسورا. When you read about the reasons for which, so the asbab al-nuzul, the reason for which the verse was revealed, to the condition in which, actually, the context in which the verse was revealed. You see, so there are so many reports about how generous was the Prophet, that even he was giving away his personal belongings sometimes. So the verse somehow asked the Prophet, you don't need to give everything away. Keep a limit. So this is the generosity of the Prophet, peace be upon him. We have so many historical reports about it. When we look at Ali alayhi salam, and so many examples, again, the verses of Quran talking about وَيُطْعِمُونَ الطَّعَامَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ مِسْكِينًا وَيَتِيمًا وَأَسِيرًا. Again, to go to that level of sacrifice and helping the others, that this verse, so it is revealed according to the Shia sources as commemoration of this level of sacrifice and selflessness, generosity. When we look at the life of Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam, so we have in different sources of Sunni and Shia sources. For example, one of the sources, it is narrated أن الحسن بن علي عليه السلام قاسم الله ماله النصفين. خرج الحسن بن علي من ماله مرتين, some other reports, وقاسم الله تعالى ماله ثلاث مرات. 2 times or 3 times it is reported that Imam al-Mujtaba alayhi salam divided all his wealth to 2 parts. So half he kept for himself, and half he gave it to charity, help people. How many people you know today? How many people you know in the last 20 years, last 50 years, let's say, last 100 years, last century? How many people we heard of this level of generosity? Rich people who give away half of their wealth 3 times during their lives. We have about Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam, this is Sheikh al-Mufid, he mentions, he reports it in Irshad that Imam alayhi salam was told that Zayd ibn Usamah ibn Zayd, one of his relatives, he is on his deathbed. Imam came to visit him, and Zayd started crying. فَجَعَلَ يَبْكِي. Imam al-Sajjad asked, مَا يُبْكِيك? What happened? Why you are crying? He said, يبكيني أن علي 15,000 دينارا. I'm in debt. And debt is a great amount. It's 15,000 dinar. ولم أترك لها الوفاء. And I don't have anything to leave. So my, for example, my children can pay the debt. Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam said, لا تبكي فهي علي وأنت بريء منها. فقد الله. Imam said, don't worry about it at all. I take the responsibility and I will pay it. So Imam accept the responsibility to pay such a great amount to help his relative on his deathbed, to give him assurance that he would be fine hereafter, his family would be fine, not being a struggle because of paying his debt. These are beautiful examples. You see the kind of the generosity. Look, for example, the example of Imam al-Husayn and the month of Sha'ban is commemorated, so dedicated these days to the birth anniversary of Imam. It is one of the reports that we have about Imam al-Husayn is someone who came to Imam alayhi to ask for his help. He had some financial need. And he was from Ansar, from the helpers. Imam alayhi told him, يا أخي الأنصار صن وجهك عن بذل المسألة وارفع حاجتك في رقعة فإني آتٍ فيها ما صارك إن شاء الله. Oh brother, you don't need to even explain to me your need. The Imam tries to protect the person from even having to explicitly talk about his needs. Imam said, just write it down. That's it. And I will make sure that you will be happy. So he wrote that, يا أبا عبد الله إن لفلان علي 500 دينار وقد ألح بي فكلمه ينظرني إلى ميسرة. Someone, I'm indebted 500 dinars to someone and he's pressuring me and I don't have anything to pay. Please talk to him, because I know that if you talk to him, he will give me some time. Imam read the letter and دخل إلى منزله فأخرج سرة. He went to his house and came back, and he had a bag فيها 1000 دينار. It was 1,000 dinar in the bag. And my son gave it to the person, and he said, أما 500 فقد بها دينك. 500 is for your debt. فأما 500 فاستعن بها على دهرك. And 500 is for your own expenses. Use them to pay your own expenses. Again, just to see the generosity, not only Imam helps the person, Imam is careful even to ask him, you don't need even to talk to me about it. Just write it down. That would be better to protect your reputation. It might be easier for you. And then not only Imam answers his need, he gave him double, just to give him even more to ease his problems. It's the matter of generosity again. Just these examples, just to look at our lives so far. How many times we got close to this kind of generosity? So again, when we are talking about charity, about infaq, we cannot see how much we progress unless we see how this teaching, spiritual teachings, is being exemplified in the lives of our role models. So even some of the enemies of Ahlul Bayt. So it is said that Muslim al-Batin, that he said that he was one of the opponents of Ahlul Bayt. He was asked about the generosity of Imam al-Husayn salam. And he was saying that, Hussein is such a person that it happened several times that he got inheritance from some relatives who passed away. And even before those inheritance comes to his hand, Imam had already gave it away to the people before even taking it. It's just these beautiful examples. This Sheikh Abbas Qumi, he mentions in Muntah al-Amal, he mentions that someone was in need and he came to Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam, and Imam was performing prayers. He started saying a poem about the generosity of Ahlul Bayt, hoping so that Imam would help him to address his struggles. Imam alayhi salam called his servant, and it seems that Qambar was still alive at the time. Imam called Qambar and asked how much we have left from the property, from the wealth that we have in Hijaz. He said 4,000 dinars. Imam said, bring it. I have someone who needs it more than me. So Imam then, the account says that Imam had his Abba, his cover. Imam took it out and put the money in the Abba and gave it to the guy, but Imam was careful not even to open the door. But Imam just stretched his hand, so giving it to the guy just not to make the guy embarrassed by looking at his eyes. You see, these are the noble moral characteristics that we are talking about. And then the guy who received Imam's gift started crying. And Imam said, why are you crying? Is this something you need more? Is this any other shortcoming that I can help? And he said, no, I'm just crying, wondering how such a generous hand would be one day buried under the ground. So again, just look about the gap that we have in our lives when we look at the examples of our role models. Let me finish my lecture tonight by another example, again from the life of Imam al-Husayn salam. So intentionally, I try to focus more on Imam al-Husayn salam because of this, his birth anniversary, to also be commemorating this auspicious occasion. There's another report that it is narrated that someone, this Salamat ibn Abdullah, he mentions that I was in need. قدمت بأبابع لي 20 أو 30 بعيرا. I came to Abu Ba'r, and maybe to the village or an area, and I had 20 or 30 camels with me, and I wanted to get some dates for my needs, maybe to sell and to pay for my expenses. So I was looking for someone who can help me with this, to provide me some dates. And I was told when I came to that area, I was told that فقيل لي أن عمرو بن عثمان في ماله والحسين بن علي في ماله. These two people, they are financially able, Amr ibn Hussein and Hussein ibn Ali. Go to them. It says that I came to Amr ibn Uthman, I explained, and he ordered that his servants to carry dates on 2 of my camels. Then someone saw me there and he encouraged me, why you are not going to Hussein? Go to Hussein ibn Ali instead. I went to Hussein and then I saw, I didn't know the Hussein ولم أكن أعرفه فإذا رجل جالس بالأرض حوله عبيده بين يديه حوله عبيده بين يديه جفنة عظيمة فيها خبز غليظ ولحم وهو يأكل وهم يأكلون. I came to visit Hussein and outside is the guy and there are servants sitting around him. He is eating with them and there is this big dish, for example, this big plate, and on it there is a thick bread, not easy, not something not easy to eat, and a piece of meat. He says that I told to myself, Wallah ma ara an yu'tini hadha shay'an. Someone who is having a simple meal for someone who is rich and having so many servants around him, eating with them, is not someone who I can hope to help. But he comes close and talks to Imam al-Husayn and presents his need. And Imam alayhi says, go over there. These are the areas that I have my dates there, and they are so collected. Take as much as you can and fill all of your camels there. The guy says, I went there and it was days collected. I took as much as I could carry on my 20 or 30 camels. And then said, when I left the area, فقلت بأبي وأمي هذا والله الكرم. I swear by the life of my father and my mother, this is the generosity. Again, wrapping my discussion tonight, I mentioned in the last session that spirituality in Islamic perspective is not something that can be isolated, can be studied isolated from the practice. It's not something to learn it from the books. It's not something even to learn it just by looking at Quran or Hadith. It is something to learn it in practice from the people, the role models, who can show us the capacity, the higher capacity of how these spiritual teachings can be applied, can be fulfilled. And I just provided a few examples today about one of the spiritual practices that's about the human-divine connection prayer, and one of the spiritual practices about the human-human connection, which is the infaq and giving to needy people. And I trust that you can see, looking at these examples, how what we perform and we call it our prayer, and we call it prayers, how what we call something we do and we call it our infaq and charity is far away from how this practice is exemplified in the lives of our role model. And it's a huge gap. And the more we get closer to them, the more we get generous, detached from the material gains that we have, material property that we have this sense of sharing with the others, helping the others. The more that we develop our spiritual connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to reach to a level at least we can feel what it means to love prayer, what is meant to understand being in the presence of the Lord and the creator of the whole world. It's only then we can have a better sense of Islamic spirituality. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the blessing to benefit from the teachings of Ahlul Bayt, from the teachings of the divine revelation, and to develop our spiritual capacity to the best of our ability, in line of what we see from how spiritual perfection is exemplified by our role models, inshallah. Please recite the salawat.